Hey everyone, I wanted to make a quick video going over some of the Nintendo controllers over the years and talking a little bit about them and their history. Um, Nintendo has so many different controllers for their systems, and there were so many third-party controllers made. I don't really want to go too much into the third-party controllers. I'll mention some of them, but I mainly want to stick with the ones actually made by Nintendo. And to start it out, we'll go over the original NES controller. It was a square design. Had a pretty long cord, so you could sit pretty far away from the game system and play. And it was real simple. You had an A button, a B button, start, select, and a D-pad. And the cool thing about the D-pad, it was actually patented by Nintendo. It was used originally for a Donkey Kong, it was like a handheld game that Nintendo had, and they won an award for it, some kind of like technology award. So that D-pad's pretty significant to the history of the Nintendo controllers. Some of the other things you could get the NES Advantage, which was like it kind of reminded, or it gave people the feeling that they were playing like an arcade game. And you had like the big A and B button. You had the turbo buttons, kind of like the NES Max that I'll talk a little bit about. And then you had the ability to just like the first player or second player, and that was kind of cool because you could plug. It like split, the cord split, so you could put one in the first player slot, one in the second player slot, and that way you and a friend could just share one controller and just pass it back and forth, and you would just select who was playing first player, second player. So that was kind of cool. Another thing, this is more of an attachment that you would just clip onto your controller, but this is the Super Controller attachment, and this kind of gave like a joystick kind of feel, almost like the circle pad for the 3DS, and that was it. That's the only thing it added. It just kind of went over your D-pad and give you that option if you thought that felt a little bit more comfortable. Now, I don't have the NES Max to show you. I'll edit in a picture so you guys can take a look at it while I talk about it. But it was just a redesigned controller, and it had something real similar. It didn't have the D-pad. It had kind of like a circle pad that's used on the 3DS, and that's how you were able to control your character. I think they call it the like a cycloid, I think was the name of it. Now, when the NES was redesigned to this fancy looking design, they came up with this looking controller, and they call it, I think, like the dog bone controller is the nickname for it, and it was just redesigned, and same thing, D-pad, start, select, A and B, that's all it was, nothing special, but had a new design to it. Now, going hand in hand with the American NES, the Japanese Famicom, the biggest difference was these controllers were hardwired into the system, and the colors are a little different. You have gold and red instead of the gray and black, but you still have the D-pad, start, select, A and B. But another big difference on the second player controller, instead of having start and select, you have a microphone right there. And I'm not really sure what games. I haven't come across any games that use it. And you have like the volume select, I guess. So if you want to control the mic volume, not 100% sure. So that was some of the differences with the Famicom. Another accessory, I guess you could call it a controller, was the Zapper, and it was a light gun used for like duck hunt on the NES. And the way it worked is when you pulled the trigger, the screen would turn black, all except for the targets that would show up in white. Well, the gun would recognize where those white targets were, and that's how it would know what it was shooting, or if you hit it or not. They can only be used on CRT TVs. It won't work on plasmas or LCDs on like newer technology. So I said I didn't really want to touch up too much on third-party controllers, but the Power Glove is kind of a popular little icon. I figured I'd go over it. I don't want to talk about it too much, but this allowed for you to play games kind of just by moving your hand. It would use a sensor bar on your TV, pretty similar to like the Wii Remote, how it uses its sensor bar. And then you got your A, B button down there, your D-pad, and then a bunch of these other buttons, a bunch of number buttons on there. Yeah, so that's the Power Glove. You could also, there were other attachments like I talked about before, the NES Max controller, or you have Rob the Robot, which is arguably a controller. You wouldn't really use it as a controller, more of kind of like an accessory. And then you had accessories that allowed you to play up to 4 people on a game, like the Satellite, which was wireless. But Those again are more of attachments, so I don't really want to go over them too much. The Super Nintendo. Now the Super Nintendo controller, I always thought it kind of looked a little similar to the redesigned NES controller. Some of the bigger differences to it, you saw the D-pad start select, but you had the addition of the XY buttons, and you had the L and R shoulder buttons up at the top. So that allowed for different, moves in games that you could do. So that was kind of cool. They had the mouse, and this was just one of those old mice that used to have the balls. They didn't have the laser then, and it came with a plastic mouse pad that you would use it on, and this came bundled with Mario Paint, so you could kind of just go around like you were coloring a picture on a computer. Going from there, I'll talk about the Virtual Boy. The Virtual Boy had a really neat controller, I think. Virtual Boy was, they say, Nintendo's biggest flop. I'm actually a big fan of the Virtual Boy. I think it's cool. It's fun to play. As you can see, there's two D-pads. There's a start, select, and an A and B. Well, the start and select and the A and B buttons kind of look real similar. It's like a mirror image. The controller's a mirror image of itself, and that allowed for left-handed people or right-handed people to play. So if you were left-handed and you wanted to use the D-pad on the right side because you thought it felt more comfortable, you could do that. It had a switch up at the top, and that's how you would turn the game on or off, the on-off switch. And then back in the, oh, I forgot to mention these. They had two shoulder buttons on the back right there. They weren't really shoulder though. They were like kind of more underneath. And then on the back they have, this is where you would plug in the power source or the battery pack to actually power the Virtual Boy. So moving along, we're going over to the N64. Now the N64 controller, I think is like a very popular. Everybody knows it was very comfortable to hold. You could recognize this thing in a dark room if you were holding it. It was kind of cool because you had a joystick for the first time. You didn't have to use the D-pad. D-pad was still there, but for most games you would use the joystick and you hold it there, and then your right hand would be over here on the A and B buttons, and then you had these little yellow buttons up here. They were also directional buttons, but they were the C buttons. You can see with the little C engraved in the controller over there. You didn't have a select button anymore. You just had the start button in the middle, and then you also have your R and L shoulder buttons, and then on the bottom you have your Z button down there, which was just a little trigger button. So it kind of, if you were playing a shooting game, it was kind of like you were pulling a trigger on a gun. Now this controller was also cool because you could add attachments to the bottom of it, like memory cards, or in this case I have a rumble pack in there, and that would clip to the bottom, and you could do all sorts of different things with that expansion port. After the N64, Nintendo came out with the GameCube. Now, if you were to ask me, and you would ask lots of people, the GameCube was probably one of the most comfortable controllers to hold in your hand. It just felt real comfortable to hold. You had a joystick over here as your main directional button, I guess you would call it, and then you have the D-pad down here. So the D-pad never went away. And then just like the N64, you only have your start button, or they called it the start pause in this case. So you don't have the select button anymore. Like the Super Nintendo, you have your XY and you have your AB. They're just placed a little bit differently, and A is a little bit bigger than the B. And your C buttons didn't go away. They just became a joystick. So if you remember, the N64 had little directional buttons. Well, this is still a directional button, but it's just in the form of a little joystick. It's like a little knob. You also have your L and R shoulder buttons, and you can push them in, and then you can push them in where they click, and that made a difference on some games. And then right there is your Z button. So instead of being underneath the controller, your Z button just moved right above the R button right there. An accessory, this isn't really a controller, but an accessory, I figured I'd go over it. For the GameCube, you could use, on some games, you could use a GameBoy Advance, and you would plug it in through there, and then you could hook it up to your GameCube. And I know Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, if you were playing a multiplayer, you could actually have someone play alongside you with a Game Boy Advance. So I just figured I would mention that, but I don't really want to go over it too much. The Wii Remote is the current controller that we use, and like the GameCube controller, has a built-in rumble. I didn't mention that before, but the GameCube controller was the first controller to introduce the built-in rumble feature. unlike the N64 that had the attachment that you could click in the bottom. But with the Wii Remote, it has the built-in rumble, and it has also a built-in speaker. So if you were playing games and you collected a coin, let's say, you could hear it kind of chime up in your hand on the remote. You have the power button up there. It's a wireless controller, so say you were sitting on your couch and you wanted to power up the system, you could do that wirelessly just by hitting the power button. Of course, like all Nintendo controllers, you have the D-pad, and then you have your A button down there and your B button on the back, like the trigger button. And then you move down a little bit, and the Wii console has the home screen. So they kind of needed to put in a home button on there so you can easily navigate to the home screen. And you have your minus and your plus button that helps you navigate from page to page. Say you were going through multiple pages, reading like a manual or something like that on the screen. You have your 1 and 2 button down there, and that's used for some things. Mainly if you're playing a virtual console game and you need to hold your controller sideways, you would then use your 1 and 2 buttons as the A and B button, like the NES controller. The attachment, you would use an attachment like the nunchuck, which would clip into the bottom down there, and you can use that. There's your joystick, and then you have your Z button, which is again like a trigger button, and then you have your C button up there, so the C button never went away. Now, a cool feature I think is cool with the Wii Remote is you can usually use it just by itself. You don't have to have the nunchuck for all games. I mean, there's lots of games that do use it, don't get me wrong, but using the controller or the Wii Remote by itself, you're able, sorry, let me see if I can do this one-handed. You're able to use accessories for it. Like here I have the steering wheel that I got with Mario Kart, and because I have the, oh, am I putting it the wrong way? Oh, I'm putting it the wrong way. Let's see. Try and fit the strap through the bottom. So you can clip in the Wii Remote like that, and because it uses like a gyro on the inside, it actually can move. You can sense movement. So when you move it like that, and that's a huge feature with the Wii Remote. The original Wii Remotes didn't have the Wii Motion Plus. It was an attachment that you had to click to the bottom. But now with the newer ones that you buy, it has it built in, and it allows for the Wii Remote to sense a whole bunch of different types of movements that it couldn't before. So here's the steering wheel. You can also get like little gun attachments, or you can get like a tennis racket or a baseball bat, stuff like that. So that's currently what we use now on the Wii.
Thank you everyone for watching. If you have any questions over any of the controllers that I went over in this video, or you have any questions over any of the controllers that I didn't go over in this video, let me know in the comment section, and I could definitely make another video, or I could just message you if you have any simple questions that you want answered. I really enjoy making these videos, and I could really use everyone's help if you would subscribe to my channel. Go ahead and leave your comments in the comment section. I like to listen to what everybody thinks, and share with your friends. Get my name out there. Help me out. Thanks for watching, everyone.